Hello, in this video we're going to do a little comparison. I'm sure you're aware that a spinning hard drive is way slower than an SSD. Fine, nothing new here. But what about we're using different protocols for our external SSD drives? If you have a Mac with a built-in Fusion drive, then you'll quickly figure that this is not a very good option. So basically, a Fusion drive is a tiny little SSD sandwiched with a rather large spinning hard drive. Spinning hard drives are a lot cheaper to build. They're durable, they're fine, but they're that slow. Not a new concept that you can actually install and run your operating system on an external SSD. This is brilliant. However, there are different protocols for SSD. We're going to do a comparison between USB-C 3.2 versus the Thunderbolt 3 protocol. This is very interesting and eye-opening exercise. We're going to compare the following in terms of boot up time and disk speed in general. We have a USB Type-C 3.2 compatible Sabrent Rocket Pro external SSD. We have a Thunderbolt 3 SSD. Also, we have the internal Fusion drive. Also, I have a Hackintosh installation with a built-in NVMe drive, and we're going to do some speed tests on that as well. Let's go ahead and do that. These are the drives. This one is the Sabrent Rocket 500GB model, supporting USB Type-C version 3.2 connection. You can't change the SSD inside, right? So this is built as it is. It's brilliant. It's a beautiful build quality. I've been using it about a year now. And this is the new one. So this is a TekQ Cube, link in the description. And there's really not a whole lot to say about this thing. Basically, the packaging shows as an enclosure, right? So they pre-installed an NVMe SSD inside, but this was meant to be just an enclosure. And it also implies that you can change the SSD if you want to. There's 4 screws. I'm not going to unscrew it, but we all know what we would see if I opened this thing up. When I bought this thing, it was about £140, and the Thunderbolt 3 compatible version of this Sabrent was about £360. I bought it once and then I had to return it because it had some weird bug where it froze intermittently. A year passed and this TekQ Cube costed me about £100 with the SSD inside already installed. So it just shows how much the prices have lowered. Also, the build quality is great. It's absolutely brilliant. Plenty of 5-star reviews on Amazon. I can highly recommend. First comparison will be a boot up time comparison. So we have 2 SSDs, both of them are external and both of them has an NVMe drive inside. These NVMe drives are roughly the same speed, so the main difference, the only difference is the connectivity speed. So one of them only supports USB Type-C version 3.2, which is around half the speed as the Thunderbolt 3 connection. This is clearly reflected in the time they reach the login screen. So as you can see, the slower SSD, it's Type-C version 3.2, took about 1 minute and 11 seconds to reach the login screen, whereas the Thunderbolt 3 drive took only 28 seconds to reach the same state, which is absolutely brilliant. It's less than half the time to reach that. And let me just point out one thing real quick. So I do not have a working macOS installation on the Fusion drive, and this is intentional. So basically the whole point of this exercise is actually circumvent on not using the Fusion drive, because it's quite misleading, to be fair. With that said, let's move on to disk speed comparison. What you see here is the actual disk speed comparison running side by side from fastest to slowest from left to right. Probably the most interesting thing about this is that the Thunderbolt 3 drive is faster than the one built in and directly mounted to the motherboard in the Hackintosh. On the right hand side we have the slower ones, the Fusion drive and the USB Type-C version 3.2. Well, none of them is really fast by today's standards. But as you can see, not all hope is lost. If you have a machine with a Fusion drive inside, you can quite easily just run your OS off an external SSD, preferably the Thunderbolt one. Our final test is going to be a real-world example of how much faster the Thunderbolt drive is. So we're going to build an application. The simplest example I could find is my personal website, thekarendeveloper.com. Basically, it's a React application. So the test is actually fairly simple. I use the timer and just run the exact same command on both drives. On the new Thunderbolt 3 compatible drive, the same process took 4 seconds less, about 18 seconds, which is definitely significant. So there you have it. I really hope that you find this video informative and interesting and eye-opening, and it helps you with your buying decision, because just by looking at them, these two drives look very much the same. They have the same looking cable, same looking enclosure. They're very similar. Even the price difference is becoming a lot less significant these days. If you're not aware of the massive speed difference between the two, then you might buy the wrong thing and you end up with a much slower machine, which clearly you don't want to do. If you find this video informative and interesting, please subscribe and like this video, and you can send me a message. Thank you very much. Bye.